All right, thank you. I want to see if we've got the panelists ready. Are they? Yeah, all right, good. Why don't you come on, everybody come up here, and then I'll introduce you when we're sitting here. Just as a brief, a little bit further introduction of Skydeck Berkeley, it is the University of California at Berkeley's startup accelerator, and it's about 1.5 years old. It's definitely university-based. It's owned by the university and sponsored by 3 different disparate parts of the university, which is a major feat in itself, because lots of times universities are very bureaucratic and don't communicate very well. But in this case, we've gotten the School of Engineering, the School of Business, and the Vice Chancellor for Research to come together to fund UC Berkeley's Startup Accelerator. But I want to introduce our panelists for this discussion, and it will be, I think, it should be an interesting one, because one thing we agree on is that we don't agree on anything. It's totally, we're all doing different things. There's probably 100 accelerators, incubators in the Bay Area, and probably 1,000 around the world. So, and everybody's kind of doing a different model. First, we have Kevin Hale, who is with Y Combinator right here, and I'll let each panelist kind of tell more about what they're doing. And then we have Uwe Horstmann. Sorry, he is with Project A Ventures in Berlin, and Tatiana Cansavelli, who is with 500 Startups, which is also in the Bay Area. And I didn't get your name, so yeah.
My name is Kainzi Baker, and I'm with Skolkovo Foundation. We also have our own incubator. It's about
Skolkovo. Yeah, in Russia. All right, great. I'm glad to have you here too. So why don't I pass the microphone? Let's start Kevin, with you, and you can describe kind of the basis of Y Combinator and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a partner at Y Combinator, and YC basically provides seed funding for startups. We give money to companies at the earliest stages. We provide between $14,000 and $20,000, and we basically run our program twice a year, once in a winter session and once in a summer session. It's 3 months long, and we actually don't provide office space or sort of staff like traditional incubators before. So we sort of started, our program began in 2005, and we funded about 617 startups total now. Our collective portfolio is priced to be about $11.7 billion of the companies that have valuations. Our companies have also raised about $1.7 billion in venture funding from various organizations.
Great. So from actually, Y Combinator is probably the grandfather of accelerators and incubators, at least in the Silicon Valley area. Everybody knows about it. It is famous, and has been around for how many years did you say?
I think we're 8 years.
8 years. Yeah.
It was founded by Paul Graham, Richard Morris, Trevor Blackwell, and Jessica Livingston.
And by the way, I thought I also wanted to say what I understand. I'll set I'll put a stake in the ground about the difference between an accelerator and an incubator, and then there's variations all around that. I'd say the traditional idea of what an incubator is the way I draw the distinction is an incubator is a place that people with ideas can come together and try to formulate those ideas into actual products and companies. And an accelerator is a place that accepts only companies that already have products, a team, some customers, and just need to really shorten the amount of time that they find their first major funding and can be out on their own. Typically, both of those traditionally have provided office space for the companies that join them. But as Kevin just said, Y Combinator does not provide office space, and yet they have a whole range of types of companies that join them. So these definitions are very loose and are constantly evolving.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Uwe. I'm based in German. I'm based in Berlin. I have been spending 5 years from 2007 on 2006 on working at a thing called Rocket Internet, which is back then when we started it was allowed to serve as managing director of that entity for the bigger part of those 5 years. It was a very small shop that started new companies. It has evolved into something really big with a couple of thousand employees, and where we basically started and incubated our own projects around industrial scale. Now I've moved on for the past 2 years. I'm running a venture capital fund based in Berlin together with my partners. And what we do is we focus on seed and Series A investments. We do something similar. So we distinguish between incubation, which is people come with ideas, we have ideas, and then we put together teams. But we also do acceleration, which then for us is we invest into existing teams. So if you have a great business idea and you look for funding, it would be great to have a chat. We invest between a couple of $100,000 and 2 to 3 million per company. And we back up those investments with operational support. So we have 100 employees on staff, a lot of them marketing, a lot of them engineering, and they are basically there to help the company scale. We believe in a model that is delivering value to entrepreneurs beyond pure capital, but actually helping them scale the companies, because competition is fierce, and if we can help reduce the execution risk in a way, there's still enough risks to make this a very fascinating journey, and that is a bit of our approach.
Hi, I want to tell you a little bit about 500 Startups. That's Accelerator based in Silicon Valley. We do provide office space, so that's different from why. And right now, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, we opened applications to batch number 8. The unique thing about batch number 8 that we'll actually host it out of our new office in San Francisco, versus all the other ones that have been hosted in Mountain View in our headquarters. And I encourage all of you to apply via AngelList. Usually for every single batch, there are about 20 to 25, 30 companies who accept it out of thousands of applications. So you still want to apply, but also make point connecting to some mentors and make sure people know about your startup so you can kind of differentiate yourself from thousands of applications. We usually have high percentage of international companies, and I think with the last batch, it's about 40% of international companies. And also we have offices in like Mexico and China, and will be more international expansion. So with that.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Hi again. My name is Katya Gaika, as I said, and I work for Skolkovo Foundation. It's a big Russian government initiative to build Silicon Valley-like atmosphere and place for entrepreneurs. And my background is in telecom and media. I spent a few years launching TV channels all over the world and working for different media and consulting firms doing that. And now, for the last 3 years, I've been working for Skolkovo. And talking about how Skolkovo differentiates from other incubators and accelerators, I can tell that we provide financial support in forms of grants, which is non-dilutive financial support. So we do not take equity. We provide free money. We spend about 200 million for the last 3 years and helped about 170 projects. We have about 1 billion more to spend in the next, I don't know how many years, while we're building the actual city. And besides providing financial support, we also give tax breaks, and we provide advisory boards, and we have all other resources. In the future is going to be Technopark. It's like a place for startups to be and work. So if you, and we are welcoming, of course, international companies. As of now, the ratio is about 30 to 70 30 international, 70 local companies that work in Skolkovo, actually receive in support of Skolkovo. And we are open and invite every one of you who would like to expand to the Russian market and get Russian government support. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, panel. Yeah. I wanted to ask some questions. I'll first say that, as you notice, each one of the panelists in their situations, they do offer funding, and yet, in my case, we don't offer funding. But we do offer advice. 30 years ago, when I was on the founding team of Electronic Arts, we had nothing like this in existence, and so we were really on our own. We felt isolated and like we were just sort of bouncing around without any real basis for making informed decisions. The only people that did help us out some were our venture capitalists, the people that invested in us. But things have certainly changed now, and I think much for the better. It's a huge advantage to be able to have the resources that accelerators, incubators, all these programs offer. They vary in length too. At UC Berkeley, Skydeck Berkeley, we offer, our term is typically 6 months. And it's a soft 6 months. If you can convince us of your need to stay longer, we'll let you stay up to a year. Most of the other ones that I know of are like a 3-month program that are really intensive during the 3-month stay, and then there's a big deal demo day at the end of the time, and then you're out. You either get funded or you go do something else. But one of the things I wanted to ask, there's an accelerator. I think I'd call it an accelerator at Stanford University, although it's not owned by Stanford. It's called StartX, and the young man that started that does a lot of measuring. And one of the things he measured was what do the companies that have been through his program value most about the program. So I'd kind of like to pose that question. What's the feedback from the companies that have been through your systems? What's your biggest value that you add?
So at Y Combinator, what's interesting is we believe that in this sort of hypothesis that you can have 3 or 4 people sort of like start a company, and they would add better value to the world than it is to go work for another company instead. So a lot of our value is sort of like guiding them towards like how do you build a really good company very well. That guidance can be something as simple as making pre-made like paperwork for handling incorporation, or handling like initial funding, like convertible notes. But it also goes as wide as building a really, really strong ecosystem amongst our founders that sort of helps people be sort of good citizens in the startup space. We have over 600 startups. That's many thousands of founders. And so within that ecosystem, we have a really strong network of people who have been sort of raised with really good values in terms of like how to like build a strong startup ecosystem. And so our founders, when they come into the program, have an easy way to sort of beta test, for example, B2B products and services, because there's every sort of market vertical and industry that's covered by our sort of startup portfolio. So both our sort of network effect and like the people that we bring to our weekly dinners helps with all of that. But for the most part, our founders really, really love the values that we teach them, the idea of like being disciplined in their sort of approach and what not to focus on and what to focus on for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, for us, and being on stage with guys from 500 Startups, Y Combinator, obviously those are great idols for all of us, I would say. For us, the business model is a bit different because we invest into 20 companies over the course of 2 years. Our strong belief is that since we invest at a bit of a later stage, that the teams already should have a good understanding about their market. So for us, what can we add to the party is basically a solid execution on their ideas. We will never be understanding their ideas better than they are, because they have been in the weeds working on that for quite some time. So for us, what people value when we ask them for feedback is executional capability, so that is mostly marketing, a lot of engineering, also organizational building and HR. We actually do a lot of recruiting for the companies because that is hard. And when I speak to, like just a couple of weeks back, we had this convention with all of our founders, and we asked them independently, so what is the biggest challenge you've had, or what is the most important decision you're facing? And they all consistently rated hiring and building a team extremely high. So for us, probably one unique aspect is helping them with hiring, because we have a bit of a brand in the Berlin and German ecosphere, so we try to use that for hiring for the startups. So despite all the operational support, when I ask entrepreneurs, so what has been very, very valuable is the network that we can create. And sometimes people who were on our payroll, who were working with the startups, then they move over and join the startup full time. And building that team aspect, that's what people give us as feedback. That has been extremely helpful and valuable for them, because that's what we can provide, because nobody knows you in the beginning, which is a great situation because no one cares if you screw up. But you need to have a bit of visibility to the world in order to build a great team. And I think we can help the companies with that.
I think what's the value? And I've been asking startups at 500 the same question, and I can second what's just been told, that the access to the network that you get getting into 500 startups is just amazing. We have the back-end system and exceptional mentors, founders, and the whole ecosystem. And the value of having access to all those people who want to help you, and they do help, is just the only thing that can beat the value of the ecosystem, is just having face-to-face time with Dave, I would say. But it's unbelievable. So, and the other aspect of you getting into any of the accelerators, I think it's kind of informal stamp of approval, if you think about it, because it's so difficult to get into those accelerators like Y or 500 startups. So you kind of move from unknown, high-risk investment target to still high risk, but somewhat vetted list, because some people understand that there are lots of people who looked at you, and just by the nature of you getting into one of those top accelerators kind of pushes you up through the list.
And yeah, thank you, Jeff. And answering your question, I would say that we're not much different from Y Combinator 500 startups and the UBI Accelerator. We just actually did a survey a couple of weeks ago to understand what's our value after 3 years of operations. And not surprisingly, the four main things that our startups had were funding, of course. And we invest as little as, well, we give away as little as $100,000 to a few millions. Because among our startups, we have companies in IT, in biomed, and energy efficiency, in nuclear even. So for us, for those companies, sometimes 100,000 doesn't mean much. So the second most important thing was tax benefits. And of course, it's a government initiative, so we can't afford such thing. It's about zero profit tax for them and zero VAT tax for the next 10 years. So it's a lot of help and value added. And of course, as Tatiana said, ecosystem. That's the word, that's the thing that we tried to create. And apparently we're succeeding because people value very highly an access to all the PR and GR resources that Skolkovo has to offer, and all the access to resources such as big technological company that joins Skolkovo and venture funds. We have about 60 that signed one or another agreement with us. So the idea of building this ecosystem is what is, I think, behind all of our efforts, I believe.
Yeah, I will agree with that, and I'll add one other thing that kind of, on one level it disappoints me, because we don't provide money, but we provide lots of advice. We bring in speakers, we have workshops, a lot of training over a 6-month period. And what do the companies say? as the most valuable thing that they take away from that, and that is the collaboration among themselves. That's what they value the most. They learn from each other in close proximity. They have it's open office, desk space. They get to know each other over the time period, and then they can go over and ask another team's technical genius, how did he solve a certain problem? And so it's the peer collaboration that people find or report to be the most important advantage they got out of the experience. And I think that's great. It's sort of a side product that we're trying to build things from what we think they can use. What they end up feeling like is that they're not alone, and that they can compare with each other from different industries and come up with solutions that they wouldn't have otherwise found.
I just wanted to add one of the stories. I talked to one of the founders of the startup that was based out of London, and his startup have been accepted into 500 startups, and he decided not to actually come and spend time on site because he got an access. He decided to stay in London and just do the whole thing remotely. Within a month, he ended up getting into the valley, and I asked him why. He said that he observed all the discussions, all the events, everything that was happening in Mountain View, and he said, I just knew I have to be there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Do we have...
Oh, that's hard to replicate in other places, of course. I'm sorry for jumping into a discussion, because yes, Silicon Valley there is no other place like that. Things are happening like that while you pass the University Avenue. You just bump into the right people. All the time I'm there, this is what's happening. And you do deals, and you find right people, find an advice. And even though it's hard to replicate, but I still vote for us, Europeans, to build the new places for attraction, so people do not have to travel far and far. I believe that we have everything that it takes to do the Silicon Valley of Europe, of Russia, of Lithuania.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, and I agree, and more than that, I think we want you to become successful. It's also about, us supporting not necessarily the environment, but entrepreneurs. So, go for that.
Yeah, it's a lot about community. Do we have time to take some questions from the audience? Anders?
10 minutes. You still have 10 minutes for a panel.
So, are there any questions about accelerators, incubators? I think there's no question about 24 hours a day working, because I think that's just the reality of a startup. And by the way, in our office situation, we do give access to the space 24/7, and people are there at all hours too. I presume that's the same case with everybody else. But are there any questions that people in the audience might like to address to the panel about either the selection process or some of the aspects of what they do in our panel's accelerators? Okay. Well, you want to run a microphone over there to a couple people?
I have two, so. Yeah, quickly. Who was with the question? You guys?
Hello, I'm Trine from Estonia. Echo. So my question is, these days accelerators come like mushrooms after rain. So how to build your competitive advantages? Gosh, I hate this.
I didn't catch the question, part of that.
Okay, it's very hard to speak because the mic is echoing.
Don't put it so close to you.
Okay, I try like this. Okay, better. Thanks. So my question was, as the startup startup accelerators comes like mushrooms after rain. So how do you build your competitive advantages? How do you differentiate yourself now as there are so many accelerators coming? Like, what are the main differentiating points? Like, why should I choose Y Combinator instead of 500 startups or Skolkolov?
Obviously, like with there being so many incubators and accelerators popping up every single day, it is quite difficult to figure out like what program would be best for you. Quite honestly, to tell you the truth, I feel like one of the best benefits of joining any kind of incubator or accelerator is that it gives you an excuse to work on your startup. I think like that's the best thing that you can have going for you. And it's one of those things where like, hopefully, you know, at the end of whatever program, it gives you then access to a means to like take it to the next level. I think for all of these programs, there's some kind of sort of graduation or demo day that sort of happens. And it's up to you to decide like which one would be appropriate for you. I mean, I think the answers you're going to get are pretty much us respouting sort of the differences between us. But I think one of the things that you sort of have to decide is like, do you need an excuse to get away from your friends and family to like work on the thing that you're passionate about? And maybe that's what you should apply for. Like apply for any program that will give you that opportunity. I think it's positive when any smart group of young people have an excuse to start trying to build something of their own. And I don't think it matters like what excuse you use to help make that happen. If you can do it without an accelerator and incubator, it's actually more power to you, is what we believe. Obviously, we'd all love to be investors in a successful one, but ultimately, I think for the ecosystem, like, ultimately, it's about you just getting started and then you figuring out whatever mechanisms that you can to make it work.
Yeah, I think the question was pretty spot on, actually, because it is like mushrooms after the rain. I think there's a lot of stuff springing up and so on. And I think, quite frankly, so that's my personal opinion, there's probably in Europe and abroad, there's a lot of people who just try to create something in order to get some free equity and not providing much value. So I think it's a very valid question. Now, if you get accepted to 500 startups or Y Combinator, I think it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, just look at the graduating classes. I think you're going to be in very good company, and you know you should do that. Beyond that, I think there is some things that you should look really carefully at. For us, it was quite clear that we need to provide money also to the companies because we didn't want just to provide expertise because we don't have a track record of seasoned Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. We need to deliver actual value, so it was quite clear for us. So yes, obviously it's a very individual decision, but also be careful. Just this is my personal opinion. There's probably also some black sheeps out there who just try to get a bit of equity, and then you're going to be disappointed by the value that those guys are actually going to provide. But you know, just my opinion on that.
I would say that you need to assess what stage you're in. And I've seen cases, many cases, where startups went through one accelerator, then moved to another one, and did few of those. That's number one. So it might be easy, it makes sense for some to get local funding, get into local accelerator, get to the point where you have your pitch, your traction, and then apply to some of the other ones that are difficult to get into. Now, it also depends what space you are in. There are a lot of new types of accelerators that focused on specific areas. For example, healthcare. There are 5, 6 different accelerators that only get companies who are in healthcare space. There are accelerators that focused on for-profit companies with a good social cause. Maybe you should really look at what you guys do, look at the whole infrastructure, different accelerators, because what's valuable for one type of company might not be valuable for you. And there are lots of choices, and most of them will be good ones, depending on how well you did your homework.
Okay.
And I just wanted to reinforce again what Yubi said. Be very careful what you're getting yourself into. Look very carefully into what are the conditions of the certain accelerators, because as you mentioned, there are a lot of accelerators, so you can find yourself the best offer now on the market. So probably we have to now compete for the best startups, which is actually true. I mean, of course, 500 and Y Combinator, they're the top of the Silicon Valley at least, and all international companies are trying to get into. But yes, as Tatiana said, there are a lot of local offers. So look carefully and try it for the best, of course.
One last question and really short comments, please, because we're running out of time. So last question.
Yeah. Okay. So we are kind of Estonian delegation. So we've also here with three. I'd like to actually personally address Katya with this question about Skolkovo. We are kind of actually looking for cooperation with you. Oh, this microphone is really horrible. Sorry, guys. But could we actually talk to you, because we are from Tartu and Tallinn. There are a lot of people who are actually looking in the direction of the Russian market, and we're quite lost with it. We know how to move into it, and we think we could actually help each other in this regard.
I heard something about Russian market. Is that so?
Yes.
Can you make it very simple so we all understand?
Yes, we represent a group of startups from Estonia and the universities. And we would like to know how we cooperate with Skolkovo, because a lot of them are aiming for Russia. They see it as a great potential market, but it's very hard to move from Estonia to Russia, and there are not many connections built.
Well, I can answer this question. As of now, you don't have to move anywhere, to tell you the truth, because we function as a virtual organization yet, because the actual facilities are building now, and we're going to be done next year. And actually a law that is written by Russian government is stipulated that you don't have to move anywhere until 2016. So you can enjoy all the benefits and all the things that we have to offer, including funding, GRPR, networking events, etc., without moving anywhere from Estonia. So we can, I believe, talk about this later. You can just approach me. I'm going to be seated in the first row. I'm happy to answer the question. I'm happy to help you guys.
Closing
Okay, I
remarks?
think we're about finished with this discussion. I do want to say, kind of in wrapping it up, though, that I think that, as I said, 30 years ago there was nothing like accelerators, and now they are all over the place. And I think if you select carefully, they can really add some value to your company and help it grow faster and smarter. And I think they're great things to take advantage of. And so I think you're very lucky. It's a great time to be a startup. Thanks.